working as a news anchor. He's like, get off it. Then he's saying how they messed up, and then obviously that did not belong on live TV. When you're watching live TV, you're not supposed to see a person kill themselves, especially with a gun. Or, anywhere like that, when you're watching live TV, you're not supposed to be, you're not, because even children watch live TV sometimes, and they're not supposed to, showing that, the last thing you want to see on live TV is someone kill themselves. Seriously, that's the last thing you want to see on live TV, is someone killing themselves. Someone killing themselves. That's the last thing you want to see on live TV, is someone killing themselves. Well, at least HD didn't come out till the late 2000s. But yeah, the last thing you want to see on live TV is someone kill themselves. Seriously, that's the last thing you want to see on live TV. I actually found one link at that video, because most of the YouTube links obviously are taken down, because YouTube, it's not the place for that, and it goes against their guidelines, which is why most of those videos have been deleted, or the channel is associated with it. One of them is private, because obviously.
Viewers were shocked, but for Romero's family, the impact was far worse. Romero left behind 3 children, ages 9, 13, and 15. They were at school when rumors of the live broadcast began spreading among their classmates. After school, the 2 older boys searched online and found the footage. At first, they had no idea who the man in the video was. But as they watched, the horrifying realization set in. It was their father. The emotional impact on Romero's children was devastating. The older boys were so traumatized that they never returned to school. They struggled with nightmares, flashbacks, and overwhelming distress. Their mother, Angela Rodriguez, later described how the boys' mental health deteriorated after witnessing their father's final moments on the internet. Rodriguez took legal action against Fox News, arguing that the network's mistake had caused her children severe emotional harm. She sought compensation, stating that the broadcast had exposed them to something no child should ever have to see. The incident sparked intense debate over the ethics of live news coverage, especially during dangerous events. Police chases often attract large audiences, and networks compete for ratings, but many question whether broadcasting these incidents live was worth the risk. Critics argue that networks prioritized entertainment over public responsibility, and the failure to censor Romero's final moments only fueled the controversy. Beyond the media's responsibility, the case also raised broader concerns about the long-term effects of censorship. Romero's children were not the only ones affected. Viewers across the country had witnessed something they were never meant to see. The psychological toll on both his family and the public highlighted the dangers of unfiltered live reporting. While Romero's actions that day were serious, the way his life ended, broadcasted without warning to millions, sparked conversations about ethical journalism.
They were saying how they messed up.
Stricter guidelines being placed to prevent traffic events from being shown to the public. The events of September 28, 2012 left a lasting impact. For Romero's family, it was a deeply personal tragedy. For news networks, it was a lesson in responsibility. And for viewers, it was a moment that could never be unseen. November 5, 2006 in Terrell, Texas. Louis William Bill Conrad Jr. was a 56-year-old assistant district attorney with a long-standing reputation for professionalism and hard work. On the surface, his life seemed stable and quiet. But behind the scenes, events had already been set in motion that would lead to a tragic and highly publicized end. Earlier that year, NBC's To Catch a Predator, working with the activist group Perverted Justice and the Murphy, Texas police, had launched a sting operation targeting adults who were trying to communicate inappropriately with minors online. Volunteers posed as underage children in chat rooms and waited for adults to initiate conversations. If a meeting was arranged, the men would be invited to a decoy house, where they'd be confronted by the show's host, Chris Hansen, and arrested by local police. Unbeknownst to Conrad, he had been communicating with one of these decoys, believing he was talking to a 13-year-old boy. Though he never showed up at the meeting spot, his chats were enough to place him under investigation. By November 4th, Conrad had stopped responding online and deleted his profile, likely realizing he'd been caught. This raised concerns among both law enforcement and the show's producers. Just after midnight on November 5th, Chris Hansen contacted the Murphy Police Department and pushed to take further action. Despite the fact that Conrad had never appeared at the bait house, a search warrant was requested for his home in Terrell. There were serious problems with the warrant. It listed the wrong city, county, and date, but the operation continued anyway. Around 2 p.m., A SWAT team was deployed to Conrad's house. They tried to contact him by phone and at the door, but there was no response. At 2:40 p.m., officers forced their way in. Inside the house, they found material linking Conrad to the online conversation. As they moved through the home, they saw him at the end of a hallway. Conrad said he didn't want to hurt anyone. Moments later, he used a gun he owned to take his own life before officers could intervene. Emergency responders airlifted him to a hospital, but he was declared dead not long after. The entire operation had been filmed by the To Catch a Predator crew. Although the footage wasn't aired immediately, cameras had recorded nearly everything, including the raid and the aftermath. The line between law enforcement and entertainment had blurred in a disturbing way. Conrad's death sparked serious backlash. Legal experts, journalists, and the public began questioning the choices made by both the police and NBC. Many were alarmed by the decision to send a SWAT team to arrest someone who hadn't made direct threats and who hadn't even shown up to the bait house. Some critics felt that the sting operation prioritized ratings over responsibility. Even the police department faced internal problems. One detective, Jimmy Patterson, was mistakenly detained by his own colleagues after leaving the sting house, highlighting the confusion and chaos of the entire setup. Soon after, Conrad's sister, Patricia, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against NBC Universal. She argued that the show had gone too far, and that its producers, along with police, had ignored the serious risks involved. The case was eventually settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. In the years that followed, To Catch a Predator stopped airing new episodes, and many began to question the ethics of public sting operations involving media. While the goal may have been to protect others, the way this case unfolded raised difficult questions about accountability, privacy, and the cost of making law enforcement part of a TV show. Louis Conrad's story is a reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control when public exposure becomes part of the justice process, and how even well-intentioned actions can lead to outcomes no one wanted. It was July 2020 in Hangzhou, China. Lai Huili, a 51-year-old woman, had disappeared without warning. She was last seen on July 4th, returning home after running errands with her daughter. Her husband, Xu Guoli, 55, said he woke up the next morning and found her gone. He reported her missing and later appeared on TV, looking calm but worried, asking the public for help. Her disappearance quickly gained national attention. Xu's public appearances made him seem like a devastated husband, but behind the scenes, investigators were uncovering troubling inconsistencies. On July 6th, Lai's daughter contacted the police, reporting that her mother hadn't returned or made contact. Xu told police that July 4th had been uneventful. They had dinner, watched TV, and helped their daughter with homework. He claimed he woke at 5:30 a.m. on July 5th and found her missing. But surveillance footage told a different story. Police launched a large-scale investigation, reviewing over 6,000 hours of security footage from the Sanbao Baiyuan residential area where they live. Cameras showed Lai returning home on July 4th, but not leaving afterward. She had vanished inside the building. Xu kept appearing on TV, pleading for answers, but his story didn't add up. Investigators grew more suspicious as they realized there was no evidence of Lai leaving the complex. Then, on July 22nd, police found human remains in the building's septic tank. The tank was drained over 25 hours using 38 trucks. Lab tests later confirmed the remains belonged to Lai Huili. Her body had been hidden in the most unthinkable place, right in the community where she lived. The next day, Xu was taken into custody. He stuck to his story at first, insisting his wife had left on her own, but under further questioning, he confessed. Xu admitted he had drugged Lai's milk with sleeping pills on the night of July 4th. When she was asleep, he ended her life. Then, using tools he had bought in advance, he dismembered her body inside their apartment. Xu said he acted out of deep personal and financial stress. Afterward, he tried to cover everything up. He filed a missing person report, offered a reward, and made several TV appearances pretending to be a desperate husband. All the while, he knew exactly what had happened. According to Xu, he had become overwhelmed with pressure, mainly from financial issues, property investments losing value, and the rising cost of their daughter's education. Although he claimed he still cared for his wife, he said resentment had built up over time. Police later confirmed that Xu had carefully planned everything. He bought tools in advance and thought he could avoid leaving evidence, but his plan unraveled under the weight of the investigation. Xu went on trial at the Hangzhou Intermediate People's Court. The court found that he had acted with full intent and called the act especially cruel, not just because of what happened, but also because of how he misled the public. On July 26, 2021, Xu was sentenced to death. His sentence was upheld by the Supreme People's Court, and he was executed in March 2023. The case became one of China's most shocking in recent memory. The Sanbao Baiyuan complex, once quiet and ordinary, turned into a place marked by fear. Neighbors were shaken, some moved out, others invited monks to conduct rituals. People avoided walking around at night, and many felt uneasy just being there. Shuboli had lived a double life, appearing as a loving husband while hiding something horrifying. His actions left lasting scars on his community and Lion's family. Even after the case was closed, the haunting details stayed with everyone who followed the story. What started as a missing person report turned into one of the most chilling cases China had ever seen. The coastal waters off Santa Barbara, California, had always been a playground for thrill seekers. But on September 1st, 2025, those pristine waves nearly became a graveyard. The area, known for its consistent offshore winds and relatively calm morning conditions, had become increasingly popular among extreme sports enthusiasts. Local marine biologists had noted an uptick in seal populations along the nearby Channel Islands, which inevitably drew larger predators closer to shore during the late summer months. Ethan Walker, a 29-year-old aerospace engineer from San Diego, had been perfecting his jetpack techniques for nearly 3 years. His companions that morning were equally experienced. Lila Morgan, the 26-year-old stunt coordinator from Los Angeles, and Tyler Chen, a 31-year-old former Navy pilot turned extreme sports instructor. The trio had planned their session for dawn, when tourist boat traffic remained minimal, and wind conditions provided optimal stability for their aerial maneuvers. Walker had invested considerable time researching the perfect location for their most ambitious routine yet. The plan involved synchronized barrel rolls, water skimming passes, and formation flying that could push their equipment to its limits. Each rider carried military-grade jetpacks capable of sustained flight for up to 12 minutes, with emergency flotation systems and GPS tracking devices as safety measures. The morning began flawlessly. Morgan executed a series of tight spirals approximately 15 feet above the water's surface, her jetpack's exhaust creating small steam clouds as it interacted with the cool ocean air. Chen demonstrated his signature move, diving to within inches of the waves before pulling up sharply in a vertical climb. Walker focused on maintaining formation while recording their stunts with a helmet-mounted camera system. 23 minutes into their session, Chen attempted his most challenging maneuver, a double spin dive that would take him directly through the jetpack wash of his companions. He initiated the rotation at 40 feet altitude, building momentum as he descended. The mathematical precision required for such a stunt left little margin for error, and Chen had practiced the timing countless times in simulators. However, a minor turbulence pocket created by Walker's jetpack exhaust disrupted Chen's stabilization system mid-spin. His gyroscope readings fluctuated wildly as he fought to regain control, but the centrifugal force had already committed him to the descent trajectory. Chen managed to activate his emergency stabilizers, but the correction came too late. He struck the water's surface at approximately 30 miles per hour, his jetpack's thrust immediately cut by the impact sensors. The saltwater was surprisingly cold for early September, and Chen found himself momentarily disoriented as his life vest automatically inflated. His jetpack, now waterlogged and useless, dragged him down briefly before the emergency release mechanism activated. He surfaced sputtering approximately 60 yards from shore, while Walker and Morgan circled overhead, shouting instructions about swimming toward the beach. What none of them noticed was the massive shadow gliding through the deeper water beyond the kelp beds. The great white shark measured approximately 15 feet in length and weighed close to 3,000 pounds. It had been tracking a wounded sea lion for the better part of an hour when the sudden disturbance above caught its attention. The predator's electroreceptors detected Chen's elevated heart rate and the unusual electromagnetic signatures from the waterlogged jetpack equipment. Chen had managed to swim roughly 20 yards toward shore when he felt something brush against his legs. Initially dismissing it as kelp, he continued his steady stroke pattern while calling out to his companions that he was uninjured. Walker and Morgan had descended to approximately 10 feet above the water, preparing to attempt a rescue maneuver they had practiced, but never executed in real conditions. The shark struck with devastating speed and precision. Chen's world exploded into chaos as massive jaws clamped around both his legs just above the knees. The initial bite pressure, estimated later at over 4,000 pounds per square inch, crushed through his wetsuit material and into flesh. The shark's serrated teeth, each measuring up to 3 inches in length, penetrated deep tissue as the predator began its characteristic thrashing motion, designed to disorient and weaken prey. Walker and Morgan watched in horror as their friend disappeared beneath a churning mass of white water and blood. Morgan immediately descended to water level, using her jetpack's downward thrust to create maximum splash and noise. Walker circled frantically, shouting tactical instructions while trying to position himself for a potential rescue attempt. Underwater, Chen fought against primal terror as the shark dragged him deeper. The predator's dead black eyes, each the size of a tennis ball, stared at him with ancient hunger. Chen managed to grab the shark's snout with both hands, pushing upward while kicking with his injured legs. The pain was extraordinary, but adrenaline provided temporary strength. Walker made a split-second decision that would later be called either incredibly brave or completely reckless. He shut down his jetpack and dropped directly into the water beside the attack site, carrying the pack's metal stabilizer bar as an improvised weapon. The bar, designed to prevent equipment damage during hard landings, measured 3 feet in length and weighed 12 pounds. As Chen and the shark reached the surface in a violent spray of foam and blood, Walker drove the stabilizer bar directly into the predator's gill slits. The shark's grip loosened momentarily, allowing Chen to break free and swim desperately toward Morgan, who had positioned herself as close to the water as her hovering jetpack would allow. The great white circled once, its primitive brain processing this unusual encounter. Walker continued striking at the water with his improvised weapon, while Morgan created maximum surface disturbance with her jetpack's thrust. After what felt like hours but lasted perhaps 90 seconds, the shark's dorsal fin disappeared into deeper water. Coast Guard rescue boats, alerted by the GPS emergency signals from their equipment, arrived within 12 minutes. Chen was airlifted to a trauma center with severe lacerations to both legs, substantial blood loss, and symptoms of shock. Walker suffered minor cuts from debris, while Morgan escaped physically unharmed, but deeply traumatized. Marine biologists later confirmed that great white shark activity had increased dramatically along the California coast that week, with multiple sightings reported from Monterey to San Diego. Experts theorized that unusual water temperatures and abundant prey had drawn larger predators closer to shore than typically observed. All 3 riders survived the encounter, though Chen required extensive reconstructive surgery and months of rehabilitation. The incident prompted new safety protocols for extreme water sports, including mandatory shark spotting procedures and emergency response training. Walker and Morgan never flew together again, each pursuing safer hobbies far from the ocean's unpredictable dangers. The remote coral formations off the coast of Palawan, Philippines, had remained largely unexplored by commercial diving operations as of September 2024. These pristine reefs, located nearly 40 kilometers from the nearest fishing village, harbored some of the most diverse marine ecosystems in Southeast Asia. The area's isolation meant that large predators still patrolled these waters with minimal human interference, creating an environment where ancient hunting patterns remained undisturbed. Ramon del Rosario, a 33-year-old spearfishing guide from Manila, had built his reputation on accessing fishing grounds that other guides considered too remote or dangerous. His clients paid premium rates for the opportunity to hunt in waters where massive groupers and other trophy fish remained abundant. Del Rosario's expertise in nighttime spearfishing set him apart from conventional guides, as he understood that certain species became more accessible under the cover of darkness. The expedition that brought Del Rosario to these waters involved a wealthy businessman seeking to land a record-sized grouper. The client had specifically requested a midnight dive, having researched reports that suggested the largest specimens emerged from deep reef caves only during nighttime hours. Del Rosario had agreed to the unusual timing, despite his general preference for dawn hunting sessions. Del Rosario descended alone into the inky water at approximately 11:47 p.m., carrying only a high-powered dive light, his custom spear gun, and 40 minutes of air supply. His strategy involved locating the deep reef caves where large groupers typically sheltered, then using his light to disorient the fish long enough to achieve a clean kill shot. The technique required exceptional diving skills and intimate knowledge of fish behavior patterns. The water temperature at 30 feet depth measured 28 degrees Celsius, with virtually no current and unlimited visibility within his light beam's range. Del Rosario had identified a promising cave formation during his afternoon reconnaissance dive, noting signs of large fish activity, including disturbed sediment and territorial markings on the coral surfaces. 43 minutes into his dive, Del Rosario located his target. A massive Queensland grouper, weighing an estimated 120 pounds, hovered motionless near the cave entrance. The fish appeared unaware of his presence as he maneuvered into position for the killing shot. Del Rosario steadied his breathing and aligned his spear gun's sight with the grouper's vital area behind the gills. The spear struck perfectly, penetrating deep into the fish's body cavity. The wounded grouper immediately began its death throes, thrashing violently while blood dispersed through the water column. Del Rosario secured his catch line and began the process of subduing the massive fish, a procedure that typically required several minutes of careful handling to prevent equipment damage or injury. The hammerhead shark detected the disturbance from approximately 200 meters away. The 10-foot predator had been patrolling the reef's outer edge when Del Rosario's dive light and the grouper's death struggle triggered its hunting instincts. Hammerheads possessed exceptional sensory capabilities in low light conditions, and the combination of electromagnetic signatures from the dive equipment and chemical traces from the wounded fish created an irresistible stimulus. Del Rosario was focused entirely on securing his catch when the shark's distinctive silhouette entered his light beam. The hammerhead's bizarre head structure, with eyes positioned at the extreme ends of its flattened skull, gave it an almost alien appearance in the artificial illumination. The predator approached with the confident movements of an apex hunter that had encountered no significant threats in these waters. The attack occurred without warning as Del Rosario attempted to swim toward the surface with his prize. The hammerhead struck from his blind spot, its jaws clamping around his shoulder and the upper portion of his diving vest. The impact knocked Del Rosario sideways into the coral formation, his dive light spinning wildly and creating disorienting flashes of illumination. The shark's teeth, though smaller than those of other species, proved devastatingly effective at penetrating diving equipment. Del Rosario felt his vest's inflation system rupture as the hammerhead shook him violently from side to side. His spear gun was torn from his grasp along with the prize grouper that had attracted the predator initially. Del Rosario fought back using the only weapons available, his dive knife and his remaining physical strength. He managed to strike the shark multiple times across its sensitive snout area, while simultaneously kicking against the coral to prevent being dragged into deeper water. The hammerhead's grip loosened momentarily, allowing Del Rosario to break free from its jaws. However, the predator's hunting instincts remained fully engaged. The hammerhead circled repeatedly in the narrow confines of the reef formation, its movements becoming increasingly agitated as it attempted to relocate its escaped prey. Del Rosario's dive light, still functioning despite the attack, created moving shadows that seemed to confuse the shark's navigation systems. After nearly 3 minutes of cat-and-mouse maneuvering through the coral maze, the hammerhead finally retreated into the open water beyond the reef. Del Rosario surfaced immediately, his emergency whistle creating piercing signals that carried across the calm night air. His support boat crew, who had been monitoring his dive schedule, reached his position within 8 minutes. Del Rosario survived the encounter with severe lacerations to his shoulder and upper arm, requiring immediate evacuation to a hospital in Puerto Princesa. Local authorities later confirmed multiple hammerhead sightings in the area throughout September 2019, suggesting that seasonal feeding patterns had drawn these normally deep-water predators into shallower reef environments. The incident effectively ended Del Rosario's career as a spearfishing guide, though he recovered fully from his injuries. He subsequently established a diving safety training program emphasizing the unique risks associated with nighttime spearfishing in predator-rich waters. The attack remains one of the few documented hammerhead encounters with recreational divers in Philippine waters. Coastal waters surrounding British Columbia had witnessed unusual orca behavior throughout the summer of 2025, with marine biologists documenting increasingly bold interactions between killer whales and recreational watercraft. These incidents, occurring primarily in the Strait of Georgia and surrounding channels, represented a significant departure from the typically predictable behavior patterns that had characterized orca populations for decades. Local authorities had issued advisories warning boaters and swimmers to maintain increased vigilance when encountering whale pods. Liam O'Connor, a 32-year-old marine photographer from Vancouver, had dedicated his career to documenting orca behavior in their natural habitat. His portfolio included some of the most striking underwater images of killer whales ever captured in Pacific Northwest waters. O'Connor's technique involved patient observation from small watercraft, allowing him to predict pod movements and position himself for optimal photographic opportunities without disrupting the animal's natural behaviors. The expedition that brought O'Connor to these waters on July 14th involved a collaborative project with marine biologists studying orca communication patterns. His companions included research assistant Sarah McKenzie and graduate student Thomas Hartwell, both experienced in whale observation protocols. Their small research vessel carried hydrophone equipment for recording whale vocalizations, along with standard safety gear for extended periods on the water. O'Connor had identified a pod of 7 orcas moving slowly through the channel, including 2 large males whose distinctive dorsal fins measured over 6 feet in height. The pod's relaxed swimming pattern and frequent surface breathing suggested they were engaged in social behavior rather than active hunting, creating ideal conditions for close observation and photography. Weather conditions remained calm with excellent underwater visibility extending beyond 20 meters. The team had maintained their observation position for approximately 2 hours when O'Connor decided to enter the water for underwater photography. His wetsuit provided adequate thermal protection for the 15-degree water temperature, while his underwater camera housing would allow him to document the pod's behavior from below the surface. Mackenzie and Hartwell remained aboard the research vessel, monitoring both O'Connor's position and the pod's movements through binoculars. O'Connor entered the water roughly 50 meters from the pod's estimated position, using snorkel gear to maintain surface breathing while positioning himself for underwater shots. The orcas appeared completely indifferent to his presence initially, continuing their social interactions without alteration to their swimming patterns. O'Connor began photographing the pod from a respectful distance, using his camera's telephoto capabilities to avoid approaching too closely. The largest male orca, measuring approximately 26 feet in length and weighing an estimated 8 tons, began exhibiting curious behavior toward O'Connor after 12 minutes of observation. The massive predator approached slowly, his intelligent eyes clearly focused on the human floating at the surface. O'Connor maintained his position while documenting this unprecedented interaction, believing the encounter represented valuable scientific data. The orca's initial contact involved a gentle nudge with its distinctive, rounded snout, a behavior that marine biologists classify as investigative rather than aggressive. O'Connor reported later that the animal's skin felt surprisingly smooth and warm despite the cold water temperature. The killer whale circled once before approaching for a second, more forceful investigation that knocked O'Connor several meters sideways. The situation escalated dramatically when the orca suddenly clamped its massive jaws around O'Connor's leg just above the knee. The predator's teeth, each measuring over 3 inches in length, punctured through the wetsuit material and into flesh. O'Connor immediately understood that he was experiencing the first documented orca attack on a human in British Columbia waters, though he later admitted that his scientific training prevented panic during the initial moments. The orca's bite pressure, though potentially capable of severing limbs, remained relatively controlled compared to the animal's full capabilities. Marine biologists theorized that the killer whale was treating O'Connor as an object of curiosity rather than prey, though the distinction provided little comfort during the attack itself. O'Connor struck the orca's snout repeatedly, while kicking with his free leg in an attempt to escape. Mackenzie and Hartwell witnessed the attack from their research vessel, and immediately began implementing emergency protocols. Mackenzie activated their marine radio, while Hartwell prepared rescue equipment and started the engine for a rapid approach to O'Connor's position. Both observers noted that the other pod members remained at a distance, suggesting the attack represented individual behavior rather than coordinated hunting. The orca released its grip after approximately 45 seconds, during which time O'Connor sustained deep lacerations and significant tissue damage. The predator retreated to rejoin its pod, which resumed normal swimming patterns as if the incident had never occurred. O'Connor swam desperately toward the research vessel while Mackenzie and Hartwell coordinated his rescue from the water. Emergency medical treatment began immediately aboard the research vessel, with Mackenzie applying pressure bandages to control bleeding while Hartwell radioed for Coast Guard assistance. O'Connor remained conscious throughout the rescue, providing detailed observations about the attack that would later prove valuable to marine behaviorists studying the incident. Canadian Coast Guard vessels reached their position within 23 minutes, transferring O'Connor to a hospital for emergency surgery. His injuries required extensive reconstruction of damaged muscle tissue and several months of rehabilitation, though he retained full use of his leg. The attack left distinctive tooth marks that marine biologists used to identify the specific individual responsible. Subsequent investigation revealed that the attacking orca belonged to a transient pod known for unusual behavior patterns, including documented interactions with recreational boats and fishing vessels. Marine authorities implemented temporary restrictions on recreational activities in areas where this particular pod had been sighted, though the restrictions proved controversial among...
You went to pick up trouble. I was talking, because you were... Yeah, talking about, how... Yeah. Talking about, how, there was a car starting to be at the intersection. But then I rolled forward by accident and then veered into the pickup truck. As I was talking about the other, talking about camping, what's happening next to me because the car was standing. Well, no, I did hit the. Actually, no, I did hit the car because I couldn't stop in time. I did actually bump it by accident. And it was blocking it was standing in the middle of the intersection. And as I was talking about it, then that's when I ran out the back of a pickup truck by accident. So yeah, I streamed 3 hours ago. Wait. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. What the hell? The stream was completely, I just realized. The stream was completely laggy. What the hell? I don't know what the hell was going on there. I should have recorded it too because I didn't realize it was just laggy. What the hell? What the hell? Yeah, why is it frozen on one frame? Now something told me that was definitely working here, so why was this stream frozen? I've always used Prism Live Studio to stream this, but why was it frozen this time? What the fuck? What? Why was the whole thing lagging? Then it was just frozen on one frame. You've got to be... Why? Are you serious?
Whale watching operators.
It was frozen on one...